We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180. Our guest by phone is Erik Rush, author of Negrophilia. Erik, tell us a little bit about the book. How did you, what motivated you to write this book, first of all?
Well, essentially a lifetime of observation, culminating in the race politics and race relations that I see occurring now in the United States. I grew up in the mid to late 60s, through the early 70s, and I in New York, and I was around a lot of different people, and I saw the black community and culture change from one that was in terms of stability and worldview and mindset and productivity, was doing really well despite the inequities in race relations and laws such as they were, and transformed after the Civil Rights Movement into one with a very questionable worldview, with a lot of social malaise, and even more tension. A lot of people say to me these days, sometimes it seems like there's more tension than there was during the Civil Rights Movement, and in some respects you're right. I believe that a segment of the black population are even angrier than they were during the Civil Rights Movement. Not everyone was angry during the Civil Rights Movement.
Why would they be angrier now?
Because they've been, the fires of their resentment have been stoked for the last 30 years or so by career activists on the left, some of them black, some of them not, who have told black Americans, despite all of the advances that have been made, that whites are still out to persecute them, that they still don't have a chance, that this is still a racist nation. And, these people, of course, have a political and or financial imperative to do this, and it's worked very well. One of the things I, typically, say when I go and speak or interview is that, what the left has accomplished with the or within the black community in America is probably the single most successful objective that they set their sights on. 90% of black voters vote Democrat, despite, as I say in the book, and as a lot of informed people know, that prior to the Civil Rights Movement, it was the Democrat Party that was well known as being the party of Jim Crow and slavery, and was then after the Civil Rights Movement was basically leftists insinuated themselves into it to the point where the leadership of the Democrat Party are global socialists, and in the case of the Obama administration, are people who are of that mindset, out and out Leninists, and that's what you have. I mean, it is a political imperative for people such as these to sow dissent, to divide, to stoke the fires of various minority groups' resentment, whether they be blacks or women or older or younger or what, you pick a label.
Why do you feel that 90% are Democrats or lean Democratic?
Basically because of the propaganda. Back in, and I talk about all of this in the book, of course, but back during FDR's presidency, he expanded social programs ostensibly, for the benefit of the black community, but a lot of what he did was to placate the unions in the North, who were afraid that Southern blacks were going to come up north to their cities and take jobs. So what FDR did was he made it a lot easier to collect welfare programs and things like that. And, of course, the politicians, Democrat politicians who were ostensibly serving these black communities were like, yeah, isn't this great? We're giving you stuff.
Right.
Well, that only served to just totally destroy the black community, particularly when it was expanded even more under Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which gives rise to what you have today. Now, if anyone talks about blacks being more self-sufficient and getting off of these, social programs, oh, well, you're a racist, or you're a race traitor, or something along those lines.
Right. Our guest by phone is the author of Negrophilia, Erik Rush.
Erik, does this have any reference to what you said with poverty pimps?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these poverty pimps are essentially these guys like Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton who are implicitly trusted by most people, by most black Americans, but who make their living and have become very wealthy, essentially keeping black Americans down by virtue of their alignment with the political left.
And it's in their best interest to keep it that way.
Of course.
Sure.
Of course.
And, of course, they also, the same two you mentioned, are taking advantage of America's corporations by threatening them.
Yeah, and that's essentially what they do. I mean, that is one of the reasons that we had the subprime mortgage meltdown, because these far-left organizations like Acorn is ostensibly working at the behest of the black Americans, help them get homes, all this sort of thing, pressured mortgage bankers and certain people in government and Congress, and said, look, if you don't lend them more money, we're going to say you're redlining, we're going to call you racist, that's going to be in violation of the banking laws, and you're going to have all sorts of legal troubles. So they went and they lent this money, which, these organizations really were, they had been, their goal essentially was to collapse the economy. So, obviously I'm not blaming black Americans for this, but it was that worldview that had been cultivated in this country that allowed that to happen.
Yeah. Erik, your website is fantastic. Can you give out your website address?
Sure. It is erikrush.com, ERIKRUSH.com.
Now, could you give that again? I'm sorry.
It is ERIKRUSH.com.
Okay.
That was a hard one for Marty.
Ray Charles.
Oh, boy.
This morning, you gave a history lesson that I really, really liked, talking about... actually, it was a little concise version of one of my favorite books, which is by Thomas Sowell, called Housing Boom and Bust. You gave a little history lesson on Acorn and exactly what happened with the mortgage bust.
Right.
And something interesting you said that I didn't realize. You said that Obama had worked for Acorn when he was a community organizer?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Obama trained their people.
I did not know this. I didn't know he actually worked for Acorn.
He worked for Acorn. He trained their people as he represented them as an attorney. Mm-hmm. Then he worked hand in hand with them when he became a state senator, and then when he became a U.S. senator. Mm-hmm. And he's essentially still working with them. I mean, it's just not above the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting because I didn't realize that. I didn't realize he was actually employed by Acorn, but that makes sense when you think about it.
Yep. Whether it was, I don't know whether it was as a consultant or whether it was, whether he took home a W-4 or what.
Or a 1099, right.
But he was an instructor for Acorn. There are photographs of him teaching their class, teaching their operatives how to do what they do.
Wow, so it's in his best interest for them to succeed. You had also talked in this article about the Cloward Piven strategy? The
Cloward Piven strategy, yes.
Yeah, talk about that for a second.
The founders of Acorn were working off of this model, the Cloward Piven strategy, which was concocted by a Columbia professor and his research associate back in the late 60s, and it was essentially the the Cloward Piven, method of orchestrated crisis. And what it was supposed to do is overload government social programs with so many people, so many enrollees, that it would collapse the economy. And initially, it was a method by which they could try to squeeze so much money out of the government that through welfare and things like that, that the economy would collapse. But essentially what wound up happening is they saw this avenue through the mortgage lending market whereby they could do what they wanted to do, and it came off quite well, I would say.
Mm-hmm. When we come back from the break, let's talk a little bit about who benefited from that, okay? We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.